Greetings, fellow Bible readers. Welcome to week 15 of our Bible read-through. This week, we go through a good chunk of the book of 1 Kings. In this book, we see the reign of King Solomon, David's son. We also see the division of that kingdom of Israel into two parts, the 10 northern tribes, which retain the name Israel, and then the southern kingdom, which often goes by the name of Judah because it was made up largely of just the one tribe of Judah who stayed loyal to the descendants of David. So let's get down to the details for each day. On day 1, as we look at chapters 3 through 5 of 1 Kings, we see some examples of Solomon's wisdom in carrying out justice for the people of Israel. It's also interesting that in the reading for today, we see Solomon refer to himself as the fulfillment of God's promise to David to have a son who would sit on his throne and build a house for him. Now, while it's true that Solomon is a partial fulfillment of that promise, Solomon is not the complete fulfillment of that promise. After all, God had promised to David that he would have a son who would reign on David's throne forever. Clearly not Solomon. The ultimate fulfillment of that promise is found in Jesus. Then as we continue on into day 2 and we look at chapters 6 and 7, we see the construction of the temple being described. The best advice I can give you is maybe to search online for a picture of that temple. I hope sometime a little bit later this week to have a video out that will maybe give you some pictures and help you to get a sense of some of the features of that temple that Solomon built, which would be such a significant part of the worship life of that nation of Israel. Then on day 3, as we look at chapters 8 and 9, it's important to take a look at all of the references to God being faithful to his promises to David, as well as to other promises that he had made to his people Israel. This is a good reminder for us that the Christian religion is largely a religion of remembering God's great promises and holding to those great promises that he has promised to fulfill. On day 4, we look at chapters 10 and 11, and here we see how Satan likes to make rebellion against God and sin look appealing. And he does that for Solomon by using his wives to draw him away from faith and trust in the true God to worship of idols. On day 5, we look at chapters 12 through 14, where we see the kingdom split in two, with the southern tribe of Judah staying faithful to Rehoboam, Solomon's son, while the northern tribes follow a man by the name of Jeroboam, who becomes king. And in the stories that follow from that life of King Jeroboam, we see some interesting lessons. In the story of the prophet from Judah who comes to deal with the idolatry at Dan and Bethel, we see the truth that God's word is to be followed no matter what. And in the story of Jeroboam's infant son who is sick and ultimately dies, we see that God is still at work even in tragedies, as the prophet Ahijah explains that this child died not as a punishment to the child, but to spare the child from seeing the punishments that God would visit on Jeroboam and his family. Then on day 6, as we look at chapters 15 and 16, we see the continuing spiritual decline and rebellion of the kings of Israel. That's highlighted especially as we look at those different kings and the turmoil and unrest that is a result of their continued rejection of God. And then finally, on day 7, in chapters 17 through 19, we get into the life of Elijah, one of the great prophets of the Old Testament. And even though he doesn't have a book of the Bible that he wrote that carries his name, he was a very significant figure. And so enjoy taking that look at his life. And as you do so, consider especially some of the spiritual truths about things like prayer and trust in God that are driven home by some of those incidents that come from that life of Elijah. That's all for this week. We'll see you next week.